Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Chris Kadowski back here with another video. And as the title alludes to, we are going to be talking about stretching. Now, this is going to be a series that I'm going to put forth. I don't know how many videos it's going to be. It could be 3, it could be 6, it could be 16. And that just shows the gravity that this situation deserves. Okay? Stretching is probably one of the most overused modalities when it comes to feeling something in your body that's not right. You know, that one of the first things people are told, oh, you got a tight hamstring, stretch that. Oh, you have a tight hip flexor, are you stretching? Oh, your back hurts, are you stretching? That is the first thing that people go to. All right. And what do we know about stretching? Well, in the early 1990s, the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research did a study and showed that technically, the more you stretch a muscle, followed by any type of explosive activity, the simplest one that we can think of right now could be running and jumping. Okay. It doesn't even have to be weighted. This study showed that the more voraciously you stretched a body part, the higher the incidence of injury was when you went to your explosive movements right after. Okay, so spoiler alert, and I'll save this for a later video. The way that I tell people to stretch is vastly different than how other people stretch, and the time that I tell other people to stretch is vastly different. But then when you when I take you through it, when you hear when you're supposed to stretch, it makes perfect sense and you're like, "Oh yeah, why isn't everybody doing that?" And here's the thing. I drive by playgrounds, I drive by high schools, I drive by colleges, and every Sunday I'll watch NFL players warming up by stretching. Okay? They get out on the field an hour, 2 hours early. Maybe they might do some, position drill stuff. And then right at the penultimate step, when they're ready to go into the game, it's 45 minutes, countdown to kickoff. People are starting to file into the stadium. And what are the athletes doing? Static stretching. Yes, ladies and gentlemen. And then they go out. Some of them survive, some of them don't. And people are like, but, you know, uh, these professional athletes stretch before they go out. Yeah, they're 20 years old. Most of them are between the ages of 21 and 25, and the athletes who may hire somebody who have people in their corner that really know the deal, I could almost guarantee you are not having them stretch before the game or before practice. I mean, I took care of Devon Best in the NFL for 4 years, and not once was I having him stretch. Okay. We utilized pressure in order to stay healthy, and he never had a soft tissue injury as a result of running or cutting. Okay. The few injuries that he did have were a result of hitting. Okay. One where his left foot was planted on the field and he got a helmet in the side of his knee. That's going to be trouble for anybody. And then he also got sandwiched between 3 players when he was playing against San Francisco. And he fractured something called your transverse process. It's the little winged part of your vertebrae. I can't do anything about that. Okay. No matter how much mobility or how much massage we do, I can't do anything about something like that. Okay. I can't turn his body into veritable rubber. But I digress. Okay, I don't want to get off track. Why don't we want to stretch? Okay, we go back to the study that I talked about, Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research. I think it was 92, 93, something like that. They did calf muscle stretches and then had people sprint, and the incidence of injury was higher the longer that these athletes stretched their calf muscles. Now, why does this happen? For 2 reasons. Number one, we have something called Golgi tendon organs in our tendon. And then we also have muscle spindle fibers in our muscles. Okay. And what these two guys do is they talk to each other. The muscle spindle fibers calibrate force needed for the contraction, And then the muscle spindle fibers calculate the length the muscle needs to be at in order for it to be coordinated to contract. Now, let's not lose sight of the fact that the fascia is actually controlling all of this, okay? You want to think about the muscle spindle fibers and the tendons and everything kind of like in the arms of the fascia, being like, okay, I'm taking care of you. You guys do your job, I'm going to do mine. All right? But I mean, you look at how chaotic some sports are. I mean, things like CrossFit and football for sure, even hockey. You could even argue something like basketball, very, very chaotic. Lots of collisions. You're cutting on a dime, side to side, back and forth, up and down, running, jumping, right? So that's why I tell people a lot that the body's a supercomputer. I mean, the things that it does are just unparalleled by any AI today. Any AI, okay? So why are we still stretching before we are doing sport? And I don't have a good answer for that. And this gentleman came in yesterday and he said, everything in my life is great, but I've had so many, a laundry list of injuries and I don't know why. And he's like, my calves keep on popping on me. And he brought in this hamstring strap that he's like, I stretch for 20 to 30 minutes every single day and they keep popping on me. And I had to look at him and say, that's why they keep on popping on you. And he didn't, I mean, he's just like, you have got to be kidding me. And, I need more. And you like, why? So I'm going to break down everything for you guys today that I broke down for him yesterday. All right. When we stretch, we basically create a new length for the muscle and also a new length to coordinate the force development for the tendon. Okay, now muscles go into tendons, tendons go into bone, right? Just in case if you're not familiar with your anatomy. And then the muscle is pulling on the tendon, which is anchored to the bone. Okay, it's an anchor point. When we change the length of the muscle, we're going to change the force characteristics of it as well. And what your fascia and your brain and your nerve and your muscle have to do is they have to re-coordinate this new length, force, characteristic. And in the study, in the Journal of Strength Conditioning Research, it showed that this could be anywhere between 15 minutes after stretching and 2.5 hours. Okay? So let's think about it. Let's say LaMarcus is a cornerback for the Miami Dolphins. And he goes out, 2 hours before the game. He's doing some position drills, just real light jogging maybe to get warm. And then he goes back in, gets his equipment. He gets cold again. And then he goes back out, does some more drills, gets warm. And then he's just kind of like standing around relaxing before the game starts. And then they go into their stretching, their static stretching. Okay, we've changed the force and length characteristics. Now he goes back on the sideline. And then in the fourth quarter, okay, now that he's been standing around for, I don't know, let's say an hour and a half, 2 hours maybe, one of the other cornerbacks gets injured, and Coach Mike McDaniels throws him in and says, "Hey, LaMarcus, go get him." And this guy's been cold. He's changed the force length characteristics of his muscles, maybe overstretched. And on the first play, he's running after a deep route with the wide receiver, and he pulls his hamstring or a hip flexor or a quad muscle, and everybody's going to look at this dude and be like, you're paper mache, you're not made for the NFL. And the fact of the matter is that these systems in the NFL, and more specifically the teams, have set this guy up to fail. Okay? Now, I realize that you could apply this to any sport, men and women, from high school, probably all the way up to the Olympics and the pros and everything like that. But this is literally the stuff that makes me pull my hair out. In 2001, I had devised a phenomenal dynamic warm-up that, I would even use for some of my CrossFit athletes as well when I owned my own gym. Okay. And it was literally, 10, 12 minutes of standing drills and then movement drills and then ground drills. But you were constantly moving. A lot of these drills were dynamic in nature, but nothing was static. Okay, it was nothing was sitting there and just stretching and not really doing much, right? So, what we want to understand, and this is from my book, okay, the Back Pain Bible. Well, what we want to understand more fully is really how to use stretching. And this is one of the reasons why I don't know how long this series is going to be. I'm just going to keep on beating the horse till it's dead and then it rolls over and then I beat it again. But I talk about a client story at the beginning, okay, where this girl came in. She had a really bad car accident. She was hit on her right side and she was having back pain. And as I was working on her, and we went through my protocol, she just kept on having this feeling in her left hip that it had to pop. So I ended up stretching, doing a pretty advanced glute stretch, and the hip ended up popping. Okay, and after that, after 3 sessions, you see right here, it was second to none. I mean, she was just like, I feel completely normal. And what she had was an impingement, okay, in her hip. So, how did we get the impingement to release? We used a lot of pressure first, okay? And in 3 sessions, I want to say we probably did maybe 50 to 55 minutes of pressure work in and around that hip and other areas of the body. And really, it was only the last 5 minutes that I reserved for stretching, okay? And that 5 minutes was taking the leg through a range of motion that it should be in. We should have approximately 125 to 130 degrees range of motion. Most people have 75, okay? Think about the discrepancy in that. You're nearly at 60%. I think that is, in fact, probably 60% of the flexibility and mobility in that hip is all you have. That's a big problem, okay? And this is why people say, oh, you have to stretch, you have to stretch. Well, the thing is, the tightness in the joint capsule is typically due to two things: adhesions and trigger points. Adhesions are where tissue is glued together, like layers of lasagna or layers of a cake. Think about smushing a cake down, okay? And then taking your hand off. Instead of it being all nice and fluffy, now it's matted down in half the size. This is an adhesion. Trigger points is where pain travels. I find a lot of this in not only the glutes, but also the quads, okay? Where people come in with knee pain, and it's not knee pain, it's quad pain. I put my elbow into a vastus medialis, into an adductor, or into a vastus lateralis, and all of a sudden I'm reproducing the knee pain, but they're laying on the table that they get usually when they're active. Okay, so with a trigger point, your pain will travel. With an adhesion, the pain will typically be represented right where the adhesion is. Okay, and that doesn't mean that an adhesion can't cause other problems in the body. It totally can. But then people's inclination is, oh, you have to go and stretch. Now, what is muscle tissue but 80% water, maybe even a little bit more? So you have a knot in a wet rubber band, and you go and stretch that rubber band then. What is going to happen to that knot? That knot is going to get much, much tighter, okay? And what you start to do is you start to excite the pressure in that area a lot more, which means you excite the problems that it causes a lot more, okay? So this guy comes in and he's been stretching 30 minutes a day for, gosh, I think like the last 18 years, he told me, all right? And what he has essentially created is muscle tissue that is locked in a lengthened state. Okay, so when your tissue is locked in a lengthened state, you can still have mobility and flexibility, but you're constantly getting injured and you are constantly having problems. All right, and the reason why this is, I've dealt with a lot of it in gymnasts and in dancers, okay? They come in and they have a hip problem, but they can put their foot up over their head. How do you have a hip problem when your foot is up over your head? Well, dancing or gymnastics is very, very hard on the body. They're put in a lot of hours. It's a lot of running, a lot of jumping, especially with dancers being on their toes most of the time. All right. And what ends up happening is we create adhesions or trigger points in these areas that are locked in a lengthened state. So the pain is actually exacerbated, it's accentuated more than it would be if it was in the case of you or I. So I think that we've gone long enough for this video because I could just keep on talking on and on about the problems that excessive stretching can create, especially when we have pain in specific joints. Okay. And I realize that I may not have touched on any of your pain points today, or you're like, well, what the hell do I do then? I kind of already told you. And, my mantra is smashing, stretching, strengthening. Your three S's right there. Pressure, we stretch, and then we strengthen. Okay. And they don't necessarily have to be back to back. You're telling, oh, Chris, you said don't do anything explosive after stretching. Well, I'm not telling you to go and roll, stretch, and then do strength work, right? What we can do is roll and stretch the night before, wake up in the morning if we train in the morning, do a little bit more of pressure work because it's totally safe to do before any explosive work. Do a little bit more pressure work in order to get the body primed, and then we go in strength train. All right, but we'll go on and we'll talk about this. I just wanted to give you guys a primer. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions for me, leave it under the video. And also, just as an appreciation for me, throw in that like, click that like button, and definitely subscribe because I'm going to be bringing a lot more content like this to you guys. All right. Thanks for being here. Love, light, and aloha as always.